All right, good afternoon, everybody. Good. Hi, my name is Anthony Stover. I'm with the Division of Education and Training with Kentucky OSHA. Been around for a number of years now, started back in 2006. And so we're going to kind of, as Steven said there, we've got a number of topics that we're going to cover. Here's my contact information. I got my cell phone number and email down here at the bottom. So, you know, this is what we're here to do, is to answer your all's questions. So if anything ever pops up, you know, feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. Yes, sir.
I don't think our mic isn't working. One thing.
Check.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. Stand a little closer to there.
Are we sharing? Is it still, it's okay. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Escape that one.
There you go.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, as I said, got my cell phone and email down here at the bottom. So if you ever have any sort of health and safety related work type of questions, feel free to reach out to us. Like I said, this is my cell phone number. At the end, I will have sort of the general labor cabinet phone number there at the end. If you don't like me, you can always contact somebody else there. And so, as just Sparrow said, these are kind of our objectives. So we're going to give kind of an overview of Kentucky OSHA for those of you that may not be familiar with it. Just sort of the breakdown of how the cabinet is set up, some of the things that they're going to be looking for, the standards that we are interested in. And then this is a kind of a wide range of topics here. And so we're really just kind of touching very briefly on each of these here with the record keeping, the heat stress and cold stress, walking working surfaces, the lead awareness and ergonomics. All right, so this is just the breakdown of the cabinet here. We have recently just sort of merged with the Education Workforce Development Cabinet. I say recently, it's probably last summer. I get late last summer we did. But OSHA, though, we fall under the Department of Workplace Standards, though, within the Kentucky Education and Labor Cabinet, it's called now. And we've got that broken down into two different divisions. Most of us are probably familiar with the Division of OSHA Compliance. You know, those are the ones everybody kind of thinks of when they hear OSHA. Those are the ones that show up and start writing fines and citations to everybody. Those we always call them the bad guys. I'm with the Division of Education and Training. And I'll kind of explain some of the things that, you know, that some of the services that we offer. It's a free service offered through the state. And we're kind of lucky here in the state of Kentucky. Not every state offers this service. So I strongly encourage either you all or the clients that you all work for to take advantage of those services. So Division of OSHA Compliance, like I said, these are the ones that people mostly think of when they hear OSHA. You know, they're the ones that are going to show up on a construction site with their hard hat and their clipboard, and they're going to start writing out citations and fines for you here. This is generally what people think of. So what is it that these COSHOs, these are the compliance, safety and health officers. These are the standards that they have to adhere to. And this all comes from the Code of Federal Regulations here. So we have the construction standard, falls under 29 CFR Part 1926. And then the general industry standard is Part 1910. And those are kind of the two main federal regulations that we have to adhere to. OSHA is in Kentucky. We are a state plan state, meaning that we run our own occupational safety and health programs. And the way it works in the nation, it's about half and half. About half states run their own programs. The other half are ran by the federal government. And I bring that up is because we fall within Region 4 for OSHA, which covers most of sort of the Southeast United States. We do not handle anything dealing with the maritime. That's all handled under federal OSHA. So we do have a couple of federal OSHA officers here within the state, and they handle, like I said, basically anything that's kind of along the Ohio River, some of the other federal sites like VA hospitals or the prisons. And then we also have a agriculture standard. I don't have a lot of experience. We don't go on a lot of farms, to be quite honest. The compliance, they may occasionally go out there, but it really refers oftentimes back to the general industry standards there. Within those standards, we have what's called incorporation by reference. And so you have to be not only familiar with the Code of Federal Regulations for standards, but as well as some of these other sort of non-governmental type of agencies. And so as you read through one of these some of these federal standards, it may state within there it has been incorporated by reference for yada yada standard. The most common ones are for the National Fire Protection Association, or the NFPA. An example would be like in the spray operation standards. If you have a spray booth, it does state that this is incorporated by reference from the NFPA codes. And so you have to be somewhat familiar with those standards as well. The other big one would be NIOSH. If you ever have to wear a respirator in the workplace, the respirators always have to be approved by NIOSH before you're allowed to wear that. I'm sure most of us are somewhat familiar with respiratory protection after the last few years there. And then the other big one would be ANSI standards. It's from the American National Standards Institute, and that gets cited quite a bit throughout OSHA standards. Now, just because there is not a standard for something doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it. We all have a sort of general duty to provide a safe work environment for employees. And so because of that, it allows OSHA to kind of go above and beyond what's just written in either those incorporated by reference standards or what is written in the federal standards themselves. We can even go by the general type of professional type of standards. What it states here is that each employer shall furnish to each of his employees employment and a place of employment which is free from any recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to their employees. So, like I said, we have to maintain a safe work environment. An example of that would be for something like combustible dust. There's not really any sort of standard for combustible dust, but you still have to maintain your workplace in a clean, safe environment that's going to be able to prevent it from having these explosive type of events that could happen with that. And so that could be potentially what we call a general duty clause or a 5A1. They can issue citations based on any sort of professional standards. The American Petroleum Institute, I'm sure some of y'all probably driven down 64 going into West Virginia, and you see the big refineries out there in Catlettsburg or the Ashland area. They have to adhere to certain standards from the American Petroleum Institute. And so if a compliance officer shows up and they see that they're not doing something according to those standards from the API, they can write a citation based on that as well. So they have a lot of sort of leeway as far as what they can cite and what they can fine for. There's a few different ways that would initiate a compliance inspection. Far and away, most of these inspections that a compliance officer would come out there on would be generate from an employee complaint. So employees, they have a right to call OSHA at any time if they feel that they have an unsafe work environment and report that. And that really does make up probably the bulk of what those compliance officers end up doing. We get calls all the time for them to come out there and show up. And, once they make a call, they are obligated by the law to show up and to start an investigation with that. Some of the other compliance inspections could be things for fatalities or amputations. And I'll have some information on those here in a little bit, but we kind of have to, if that happens in the workplace, we kind of have to tell on ourselves if that does. So you have to call OSHA. Imminent danger situations, and that could just be something visually that, somebody could see from the road, they could call it in. They would have to go in there and show up for that. It could be a referral from another governmental agency. And then it could also be just part of that general schedule. Oftentimes with the general schedule, it's often based on the injury and illness rates of a particular type of industry. That's what they try and focus on more than anything in an attempt to try and get those injury and illness rates lower down. But it really is kind of random, and they can show up at any time at any workplace in the state of Kentucky. All right, so some of the different types of inspections that they're going to look at, we got imminent dangers. For an imminent danger, that's going to be something that will, just open these all up here. Imminent danger is going to be something that's going to pose some type of something that could cause either serious injury or harm or a possible fatality in the workplace. What they would generally do is if they encounter something along those lines, they're going to either have to have the employer fix that right away as soon as they show up on site, or remove those employees from that imminent danger until that situation is fixed. Other types of inspections, again, would be fatalities, hospitalizations, any sort of complaint or referral. Could be follow-up inspections as well. They may come back just to verify that whatever they've told them to fix, they did actually go and fix those. They can be part of a program inspection, and these have kind of been on the rise within the state. And there's a few different ways that those can operate. We have what we call different types of emphasis programs. We have national emphasis programs that are countrywide, or the nationwide. Right now, we've kind of been harping a lot, the federal OSHA, on the trenching. That could be any sort of excavation type of activity. We've had quite a few fatalities across the nation with trenching and excavations. Combustible dust. This has been around for a while, actually. This was back in 2008. There was a Imperial Sugar down in Louisiana. Does anybody remember this happening at all? There was a huge plant explosion, but sugar is considered a combustible dust, and because of that one, they had a combustible dust explosion in that plant. It basically leveled the entire plant, and several fatalities from that. And because of that, though, they happen pretty regularly, to be quite honest. You'll see them on the news occasionally. It might just be something small, maybe no fatality, maybe no injuries, but I'll see something on the news in the Louisville area where a combustible dust explosion happened in some workplace. So they do happen. And it was just recently, just within the last 2 weeks, they've reissued that national emphasis program. I don't think we've really been able to lower those types of combustible dust explosions in the workplace that would satisfy the federal OSHA. We also have what we call regional emphasis programs. So again, we're in Region 4, so that covers most of the southeast of the United States. There's some issues with noise within our region, and so there's been an emphasis program targeting trying to reduce the noise exposures in the workplace. We also have what's called local emphasis programs. So statewide, we've been focusing on residential construction. A lot of it has to do with roofing. Roofers have always kind of been at the top of the fatality list for workers in the state of Kentucky. However, though, recently landscapers have sort of taken over the top spot here. And it's kind of no wonder. I'm sure many of you all can drive around here in the summertime, and you see it seems like everybody's got a truck with a trailer and mowers on the back of it. It's an easy business to get into. It has a low overhead cost, but they may not necessarily have all the appropriate training that they would need to keep themselves safe out there. Oftentimes you'll see them mowing, they don't have they don't have the bars placed up over top of them properly. You can probably almost guarantee you're going to see them all have them fold down. They don't take just a few minutes there to set those up, and so we get a lot of rollovers that ends up crushing or crushing the employee or the person that's out there mowing the grass. And then we have what's called top and stop, and those are based upon labor statistic numbers. Those would be industries that have really high sort of injury and illness rates within those industries. So here we have kind of an example of a trench. I don't know if you can make out this guy. He's down here in the bottom of it. We got a few issues here with this. We've got this trench. It's right next to the road, so we don't have any sort of barrier set up here right next to the road. So there's could easily have a car go off to the side there, crush the employee, the guy that's down there in the trench. We've got this spill pile. We got it just right here next to the edge of the trench. So, you might not think, oh, well, there's just dirt there. They got to do anything. Once the sidewalls collapse, or if that spill pile, if that were to fall over, that could very easily kill that employee. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of weight with all that dirt right there. And even if it doesn't even really have to cover them up all the way, if you can get it up just to their waist, if they sit there long enough, all that blood gets shunted away from their lower extremities. And then as you start digging them out, the blood all rushes back and you go into shock and you could potentially die from it. So this is a real serious issue here. And there's certain things that you have to do every time you dig a trench in order to keep those employees safe. For this one here, a simple fix for that would be for what we call a trench box. That's just a big metal container that holds up the sides of the walls there and make sure that doesn't ever collapse in on that employee So if there's a simple fix, sometimes it's just, it's easier just to send them down there than to do the right thing. All right, so let's say a compliance officer's gone through your facility. There's a few different types of violations that they could potentially cite for. The first two we have here are other than serious or a serious violations, and those both carry a maximum penalty of a little over $15,000 for each violation that they were to encounter. That being said, it usually doesn't go all the way up to the maximum. I always tell everybody to go to arbitration. That usually will help lower the fine for someone that for an employer. So always go and talk with that compliance officer and the director and whoever else is going to be involved with that, so you can at least try to lessen those fines. Next up, we have are the willful and repeat violations. Those carry a penalty 10 times that amount. So those could go up to $156,000 per violation. So we're talking pretty serious numbers. Now, it's a pretty sort of rare thing to get a willful violation. There's a lot of onus on the compliance officer to prove that, this employer willfully put all these employees in harm's way. But we're talking pretty serious monetary value when you get into that realm. And then we have the failure to abate. So the employer just says, we didn't fix it. We're not going to do it. What are you going to do about it? I think. Right? So then we kind of get into some other issues with the failure to abate. I won't bother with those that rarely ever have come up that I'm aware of. All right, so there are a few reporting requirements when you have a fatality in the workplace. And I'll point out too, these are specific for the state of Kentucky. I don't know if anybody, do you all have clients? Is that how you all work, or is it, I'm not really sure how, I kind of read on the website kind of what you all do, but I'm a little unfamiliar. But these are all reporting requirements just in the state of Kentucky here. If you have clients or whoever else that might be out of the state, they are a little bit different. So for fatalities in the state of Kentucky, you have 8 hours from when you know about that fatality in the workplace to report that to OSHA. And that is any fatality. I mean, even if it's something like a heart attack and you think it's not work related, if it happens in the workplace, you have to call, because the compliance officers are going to have to start an investigation. Maybe it was something heat related. Maybe the employee kind of got overheated. They had a heart attack because you were working too hard. All right, so they're going to have to come in and do an investigation to determine, what was the cause of that fatality. For hospitalizations, amputations, or loss of an eye, you have 72 hours to report those. Federal OSHA, for all those, they have stated it's 24 hours. So if you've got somebody outside of state here that you are concerned for, that it is a little bit different for those reporting requirements. But we were able to prove at the state of Kentucky for federal OSHA that this has worked for us. We've been able to make good strides with it, and so they've allowed us to keep sort of this time scale on that. If you do ever have a fatality, you do need to call the Division of Compliance. This is sort of the general phone number there for Kentucky OSHA. And if you can't get a hold, or if it's after hours, there is the 800 number for the federal OSHA, and they would forward that on to us. All right, so for the Division of Education and Training, where I'm at, we kind of operate on the same sort of schedule that compliance does. The only thing is that everything that we do, there's no penalties or citations involved. And this is all by the request of the employer. I'm not going to show up unannounced in the facility. They will send in a request to our offices. I will set up a time and date for us to come in there and do this. These are sort of program inspections. They've asked us to come in. The great thing about it is they are free. They're confidential in the sense that, I'm not going to go over to the offices in compliance like, man, you should have checked this place out. Nothing like that's going to happen. This is all just kind of kept between our offices and the employers. What we do is just sort of the same thing a compliance officer does. We do an on-site consultative visit. We do a whole walk through your facility, kind of see what we see, tell you where you need to fix things. I work in the health division over with the Division of Education and Training. And so some of the extra things that we can do would be the on-site monitoring. So if you've got employees being exposed to any sort of hazardous chemicals, or they're being overexposed to noise, that is something that we can do. Again, it's all free of charge. I'm not sure what a private consultant charge, but I know it's going to be more than free. So take advantage of it if you need to. And we have no penalties assigned to anything that we do find. We just ask that whatever we do find, that you correct those on your own. We issue a report. You just respond back and tell us what you did to correct those actions there. Beyond the consultation side, we have a lot of training that we've been putting together. We've been putting together this sort of e-training content since around 2009, I believe. And we've added more content all the time to that. And this is sort of a sampling of some of the various courses that we offer. And we kind of break them down into sort of the core OSHA classes. We got safety classes shown here, as well as the various health classes. And like I said, we're adding new content to it regularly. Generally about once a month, we do try to host an online webinar. And you can log in and watch those live if you want, but we record those and you can always go back and watch those at a later date. If we don't maybe have the content online that you're looking for, we can always come on site, just like I am here today. You can request training, and we can show up at your facility and provide training in person for your employees there. This is sort of a small list of some of the various classes that we offer, though. But we get bloodborne pathogens, electrical safe work practices, emergency action planning, fall protection, health hazards, permanent required confined spaces, record keeping, and silica. I will point out too, we have what's called population center trainings. This is where we go to sort of the major metropolitan areas around the state. So Louisville, Lexington, and then oftentimes down in Duke area, Western Kentucky. We'll spend a whole week doing various training courses. We'll have a morning session and an afternoon session where we'll spend, 2, 3, 4 hours on various topics, talking in depth about each of these sort of different subjects here, and then another one in the afternoon. And then finally, we have what's called our partnership branch. With the partnership, we have what's called the Voluntary Protection Partnership Program, or VPP. This is sort of for those companies that are a little go above and beyond what is just required within the standards of OSHA. Generally, these are companies that have low injury and illness rates. They're just really trying to strive to do the best thing they can for their employees. If you're maybe injury and illness rates aren't quite where they should be, maybe you have had a bad year and you had quite a few employees get injured, you can start out with our SHARPS program, and that is sort of an intervention program to help try and mitigate some of those injury and illnesses, try to get those back under control. And then we also have what's called the construction partnership program, and Steve Jones runs the construction program. Usually it's for some of the larger construction jobs that are going on in the state. They did the hospital expansion down in Lexington, same in Louisville. Pretty much any sort of large construction job, they usually will contact over here and try to partner up with the general contractor, try to partner up with us to help mitigate some of those issues that they might have. All right, so we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk a little bit about each of those topics that we talked about in the objectives here. So start off here with the injury and illness record keeping. I'll say this one probably generates a lot of questions. If you ever sit in, if this is sort of a gray area for you, I would strongly suggest that you go to the population center training. We have one coming up in Lexington. We don't have a specific date yet, but I believe there's going to be one in March. So if you are in charge of keeping records there for injury and illnesses in your workplace, I would strongly suggest going to that class. There's always a lot of questions and gray area when it comes to this. So there is a size exemption on this. So there's a partial exemption for companies with 10 or fewer employees at all times during the calendar year. They don't have to maintain injury and illness records. I think probably a better way to state that really is that if you have more than 10 employees in your facility at any time throughout the year, you're going to be required to maintain those OSHA 300 logs. Again, that's based on the number of employees in the entire company. And you would have to include your temporary employees in there too. If you have, that kind of gets again another kind of gray area. If you are providing a temporary employee with sort of the time, the knowledge, or the tools to perform a job, you basically have to kind of treat them as they are your employee. So if you have temporary employees, they get injured on the job, they would have to go on your injury and illness logs, not for the temp agency. There are a few industry exemptions for that. So you do have to know your industrial classification code. This is based on the North American Industry Classification System, and it's all based on that. There are certain sort of, I guess, low risk, for example, like dental offices, they're pretty low risk. There's not a lot of high hazards there that they're going to be, so they are exempt from maintaining injury and illness logs. The covered employees, so it's going to include obviously any employees that you have on your payroll. Again, employees that are not on your payroll who are supervised on a day-to-day basis by the employer. So again, those temporary employees, any employee of a corporation, and we would exclude any sort of self-employed or people that have joined in a partnership. You know, they're sort of the owner operators of that company. You don't have to maintain injury and illnesses for those type of companies. So the partially exempt employers, even though you don't have to maintain those logs, we still have to, we're still beholden to make sure we're reporting fatalities, hospitalizations of employees. So hospitalizations, if you have one employee that goes to go be treated, you know, if they have an overnight stay, that's an inpatient hospitalization. You have to report that to OSHA. And same for workplace amputations or a loss of an eye in the workplace. So we still have to you don't have to maintain the injury and illness logs, but you still are beholden to notifying OSHA of those types of injuries in the workplace. Or if you're specifically requested to do so by OSHA, maybe you had a lot of injury and illnesses and they say, well, you should probably start maintaining those. You're going to have to maintain them. Or if the Bureau of Labor Statistics specifically calls on you to say that you need to maintain those injury and illness logs. All right, so the reporting requirements, Sparrow mentioned there, this is somewhat new. It's kind of been phased in over a couple of years there, but it is fully implemented now. So if you have an establishment with 250 or more employees, you are covered by this new record keeping regulation. So you have to electronically file your injury and illness log information with OSHA, and the website for it is down here at the bottom. It's this OSHA.gov injury report. And this is sort of new. And I will point out too, this, you know, I would say this is probably a local emphasis program, because I could tell you for sure that compliance officers are going out and they're looking at injury and illness logs. You know, I don't know exactly why they're doing that. I mean, I think part of it's some of it from not everybody turning in these electronic forms for that, but I think it's just kind of some low hanging fruit for them to go out and write citations on to some extent. So this is something they're really actually hammering pretty hard, and they are writing fines and penalties and citations based on these requirements here. So this is something that's easy to fix. If you have to do this in your facility, I strongly recommend that, you know, that your injury and illness reporting information, that's all kind of up to snuff there. This has to be done by March 2nd. So for example, all of your 2022 information is going to have to be entered by March 2nd of this year here. So it's coming up pretty quick here. And then there's a reporting requirement for establishments that have between 20 and 249 employees in certain high-risk industries. And again, that's based upon your industrial classification. So you're going to have to know what those are there. And there's a link for that here in this at the bottom here, determine if your industry falls within those reporting requirements. All right, so here's an example of the OSHA 300 forms. They're pretty self-explanatory. You know, that being said, you know, what goes on there, I think, is what gets a lot of people as far as whether or not something is considered an injury or not. For something to go on the OSHA 300 log forms here, it has to be something that would be considered beyond first aid. All right, so if you just because you send somebody off to go to, you know, wherever it is that you use, Baptist Works, for example, you have an employee get injured. If they just go up there to the Baptist Works and they put a Band-Aid on them and send them back on into work, that's not necessarily a recordable injury. You know, those are just first aid measures. If they go there and they say you need to go home and take 600 milligrams of ibuprofen, well, that's a prescription strength ibuprofen. All right, so that is beyond first aid, and so that would be a recordable injury. So I think this is where some of the confusion, the gray work kind of, or the grayness of what goes on there comes up for most people. It's not the same as workers' comp. Workers' comp wants everything, right? They want to know about every injury in the workplace. I'm not workers' comp. I'm not real familiar with that, but the This is basically anything that has to be beyond first aid. You know, like I said, they're pretty self-explanatory as far as what needs to go on there, but if you're in charge of it, you know, certainly sit through at least our online course to make sure. And then this is the 300A form. Go back to this here. Once you kind of get to the end of the year, you're going to need to total up all this information, and it all goes down on this line down here on the bottom. And then that information gets transferred over to your 300A form. This is the information that you're going to submit electronically to OSHA on March 2nd of this year. I will also point out too, there's a little bold part down here in the bottom. Since we are within that time of year right now, you have to post this for your employees to see from February 1st through April 30th. Not everybody always does that. I've gone in plenty of workplaces where they have not put this up. And this is just so that your employees are aware, you know, what kind of injuries are happening within your workplace. All right, let's talk a little bit about heat stress and cold stress. All right, so for cold stress, we don't have a standard for cold stress. I say that it does get mentioned in a couple of standards like work camps. You know, we don't really have work camps. I don't think I've ever come across any sort of work camp. So it's safer to say we just don't really have anything for it. But as I mentioned before, we do have the general duty clause. So we still have an obligation to protect our employees while they're outside working in these cold conditions. So we need to train workers on how to recognize some of the symptoms of cold stress, how to prevent cold stress, injuries, and illnesses. Some of the importance of self-monitoring and monitoring your coworkers for any of those symptoms of cold-related emergencies. What would be a cold-related type of stress that somebody could succumb to? Yeah, hypothermia. Yeah, frostbite. Yeah. So, you know, you want to train your employees how to recognize those kind of things. I've suffered from frostbite before. It happened when I was a kid. We were in Canada. Like my ear got stuck out of my hat. It's brutally cold outside. You know, we're talking like negative wind chill temperatures. I was out there all day long. I came back in at the end of the day. I was taking my hat off. Oh, my ear's frozen. You know, it was frozen solid. I felt like a little brick of ice. And I was 9 years old. I was turning 10 that week too. And so we had a nice. We were staying in a hotel. We had a nice big birthday celebration. My ear eventually thawed out. You know, the next day it swelled up probably twice its size. And so we had the whole restaurant. They're in there singing at me. I'm looking like Dumbo over here. My ears all swollen up. So you know, it is an issue. I still suffer, you know, from it today. I mean, my ear is very sensitive to, you know, the cold temperature changes. Anytime the temperature drops, you can tell by my ear it starts turning red. So that's right. Yeah. So, you know, make sure we're training our employees. So again, train them on first aid. If you have first aid responders in the workplace, make sure that they know how to recognize all those signs and symptoms, what they need to do to treat for those. And then also train them on how to select for proper clothing, you know, in those cold, wet, sort of windy conditions. You know, that's all going to make a big difference for those employees, you know, particularly, you know, like the picture here is for those line workers. They're out there all day long and stuff. All right. And then, again, we don't have a heat stress standard yet, but that one is actually in the works. That will come about. Your guess is probably as good as mine. You know, OSHA doesn't move real fast, but that is something that's on the horizon. It's been sort of promulgated. We don't have a final ruling on that yet. These things move about as slow as molasses sometimes. So you know, it may be a couple of years before we get an official standard. So I'm not real sure, you know, what the standard's going to become with heat stress. But we do have a few states that have already implemented their own heat stress standards. California has their own heat stress standard, Oregon, Minnesota. There's one other one too. I can't remember who it was, but you know, I would say that whatever standard comes about, it's going to be, you know, we're not real keen on inventing the wheel with OSHA. They're just going to adopt probably one of those, or at least portions of it. My guess would be most likely with the Oregon OSHA standard. The others focus only for outdoor workers. The Oregon OSHA standards focuses on indoor and outdoor workers. So I would suspect it's going to be something along those lines. But you know, just so that you have it for your knowledge here, you know, there are a few different things that we could succumb to when working down the heat. You know, you get out here in August in Kentucky, it's oppressive. I'm not a cold, hot weather fan, so I'm not a big fan. But you know, first thing you could probably many of us would probably succumb to heat cramps before. Symptoms of that would be muscle spasms, heavy perspiration. The person may even start to become weak or lightheaded at that point. if they're experiencing those symptoms, get that person out of the hot environment. If they're outside, even if it's just putting them in the shade of a tree, that's going to drop them down 10 degrees just doing that. Make sure just let them rest, and then make sure you're giving them plenty of fluids by mouth. Oftentimes we'll try to reach for things like Gatorade or Powerade, and we do lose salt, and that is one of the reasons our muscles start cramping up, is because you've lost some of that salt in your body here. But if fluids, though, really, we should probably focus more on the water. And I don't really have anything against the Powerade and Gatorade. The main thing, the main issue with those is the amount of sugar that's in them. As you consume sugar, it acts as a diuretic, meaning you're going to have to urinate more frequently. And so when you're out there perspirating, sweating all day long, you want to try and retain as much of those bodily fluids as you can. And so that's why I said, try to stay away from sugary drinks. Water is really going to be the best thing you can do. If the electrolytes are really your concern, get some salt tabs, and just pop those, or maybe a little teaspoon of salt and consume that every now and then. That's going to be a lot better for you than drinking a bunch of sugar when you're outside hot and sweating. If that's not properly addressed, though, it can lead to what we call heat exhaustion. Symptoms of that would be heavy perspiration. It may have cold, clammy skin. At that point, too, they can start feeling a little dizzy or faint, just kind of like you're going to pass out. Or they might start feeling kind of nauseous and sickly feeling. This is starting to get kind of serious. So you want to seek medical attention. If you have first responders and they're trained within your facility, they should be able to handle someone at that stage. But you certainly want somebody there to monitor somebody if they are experiencing any of those symptoms. Go ahead and remove any excess clothing that they might be wearing. If they're wearing, a lot of heavy PPE over top of them, get that stuff off of them. Allow them just to kind of cool. Make sure you have them sit or lie down too. If they're feeling faint, like they're going to pass out, you don't want to compound the issue and have that person pass out on you and then bump their head. Now you got two issues besides just the heat there. So have them sit or lie down. And again, make sure we're giving them plenty of fluids to drink there. And then next, if that's not properly addressed, it can lead to what we call heat stroke. Heat stroke it's sort of just like a fever, really. You're going to have an elevated body temperature. The person may become unconscious or having convulsions. And at that point, too, they've kind of given all they can give. They're not sweating anymore. They could become nauseous or vomiting. Delusional, just irrational behavior, just generally just sort of unresponsive to sort of verbal commands. This is a real medical emergency. You're going to need to call 911 if they are experiencing these symptoms. EMS is going to be able to do some things that your first responders on site are not going to be able to do. Notably, giving them IV to hopefully kind of get some of the salts back into their body there. While you're waiting for them, again, get them out of that hot environment. No need for modesty, get the clothes off of them because we want to try and cool their body down as rapidly as possible. As you might have ever had small children, if they have a fever, what do you do for them? Yeah, cold bath, right? And so this is sort of the same concept. They're really running a fever. You can touch somebody that's going through heat stroke. They're going to feel like they have a fever. They're really hot to the touch. They're going to have that sort of reddish color to their skin, just like a baby would when they have a 104-degree fever. Apply some ice packs. So you want to focus on sort of the major arterial locations. So around the neck, under the armpits, and the groin area. Or if you don't have those, get them covered with some wet towels because they're not sweating anymore. Our primary means of cooling our body is through perspiration. So you got to get some liquid on their skin there to help them cool down while you're waiting for that EMS to arrive. All right, walking working surfaces. This is a kind of a big standard. So I'm just kind of keeping it really kind of narrow focused here. This is a little bit out of my area of expertise, I will go ahead and say too. But for walking working surfaces, the idea is really all places of employment, passageways, storerooms, service rooms, walking working surfaces. We got to keep those clean, orderly, and in sanitary conditions. We don't want to see a situation like this where we've got, garbage kind of strewn all over the workplace. We want to make sure all of the walking working surfaces are maintained free of any hazards. So, free of any sort of sharp or protruding objects. You go on a construction site, you're gonna find those. There's plenty of nails and boards sticking up all over the place. But that is not what they're supposed to be doing. No loose boards, no corrosives on the ground, no leaks, spills, snow and ice. Those have to be cleaned up as well. And then they have to be inspected regularly and maintained in a safe working condition. And then the employer must also provide and ensure that each employee uses a safe means of access and egress to and from those walking working surfaces. And that would include, sort of your exits way. You want to make sure that those are all kind of free of any sort of materials that might be in front of those exits there. All right, lead awareness. This was kind of, I think, one of the things, this is probably something that you all come in contact with is that something you all kind of focus on? It's not like you all do like child safety. So I mean, I'm kind of thinking along those lines there. There are still houses that have lead paint in. So some of the products that lead was commonly used in gasoline. Does anybody remember leaded gasoline? I vaguely kind of remember it. The phase out for that began in the 1980s. But this is it's an ongoing issue. For example, in New York City, they still have disclaimers in New York City. Don't grow a vegetable garden because of leaded gasoline. It's gotten so there was so much leaded gasoline used, and it comes out of your car exhaust engine. It's completely contaminated the soil there. You got so many cars driving around, and so their soil is still contaminated with lead in the New York area. Smelting processes, lead batteries, that's probably where we would see most lead, at least for me personally, where I would see it. Certain paints and coatings, soldering, I'll encounter that occasionally. Auto manufacturing and certain printing operations still use lead-based paint. So in the late 1950s, paint manufacturers, they started to voluntarily reduce the lead content for most paint that would be for residential use. And then in 1978, the Consumer Product Safety Council, they've limited paint for residential use to 600 parts per million, which is, it's essentially lead-free paint at that point there. But they do still sell lead paint out there. It is good paint. It does last, it holds up really well. You just don't want to have it in your house, certainly on the trim where little kids might go up and put their mouse on it, right? Main routes of entry though for lead is the main one's really going to be inhalation. So either somebody breathing in lead fumes or dust and the remediation for any sort of lead-based paint. That's really kind of the most common, at least workplaces where somebody's going to encounter that, or in the home if you're trying to clean up any sort of lead-based paint in the home. Ingestion is another possibility though. If you're working with lead, you're using your hands, you're touching lead all day. If you don't properly wash your hands, you go smoke a cigarette or consume something afterwards, you're going to be ingesting some of that lead along with it there. Some of the health effects. So lead, which gets inhaled or ingested, it gets into our bloodstream and it circulates pretty much everywhere in our body. Now we do excrete it over time. It does come out of our body. Well, I'm going to preface that with a caveat. As adults, we're pretty good at excreting it. Children, though, we have a little bit more of an issue with. So some of it's excreted, some of it remains in our organs and body tissues. All right. And, over time, most of it's going to come out. But if that exposure is going to continue, the amount that gets stored in your body, it's going to increase, if you're absorbing more than you're able to excrete on it. During prolonged chronic exposure, so we're talking, over years, repeated exposures, some of those body systems that get affected, the brain, there's a pretty strong correlation between lead exposure and IQ. So if you continuously get exposed to lead, it can lower your intelligence quotient. Your kidneys, it can cause issues with your muscles, muscle cramping. It can get into your bones, and that's why I mentioned the children earlier. If you get exposed as a child to lead, you could be stuck with that forever. It does like going to the bone more than any place. And so since kids are constantly growing, if it gets into their bone, the lattice structure of bone is eventually going to grow over it. They're just going to be stuck with that lead forever. And that could cause brittleness in the bones for those children at a later age as well. It goes into the blood forming organs. It can get into our reproductive system. So it can lower men's sperm counts or affect women's menstruation cycles. So don't get exposed to lead. It can affect all kinds of bodily functions. The lead standard for OSHA, so this is just sort of the highlighted paragraphs of if you've got lead in your workplace, these are some of the things that you're going to have to do. So we need to have regular exposure monitoring. So that's going to be just air monitoring for those employees. So it's going to be personal exposure monitoring to ensure that they're not getting over what OSHA calls the permissible exposure limit. For lead, it's set at 50 micrograms per cubic meter over an 8-hour workday. That is sort of the average that they can be exposed to throughout the workday. So if you've got lead, and this one's, the OSHA standards are not always the most well-written, because lawyers wrote them, of course. Right? So they're not always, but this one is pretty black and white. If you got it, you have to monitor for it. If you do have lead, you have to institute some form of engineering controls or administrative controls. So engineering controls would be things like ventilation. If you've got lead fumes, you need to exhaust that lead fumes away from that employee. If that's not feasible, then we try to do administrative controls. And that would be things like worker rotation to try and minimize the amount of time any one employee is going to be exposed to it. And again, it's pretty black and white on that one. You have to try to do those things first. If those control measures that you put in place if they don't cover it, you can't, if that doesn't do enough to get it back down below OSHA's permissible exposure limit, then you go to respiratory protection. And that's sort of that PPE, that's our last line of defense. That's part of OSHA's hierarchy of controls. That's what we've always kind of adhered to with any hazard in the workplace. You want to try to engineer it out. If you can't do that, then we try to do some type of work practice controls. And then if those don't work, then we go for PPE. The PPE is that last thing that we try to do. If you have lead, you have to have a written program. And it kind of goes within the standard of what that written program that you have in your workplace must look like. You have to provide protective clothing for your employees. Make sure you have regular cleaning within your facility so that we're cleaning up any sort of fugitive dust that may escape from where that work area is. Provide change room for your employees. You don't want them to get lead, dust, or fumes or anything else on their clothing and then get in their vehicle, drive home and take all that stuff home with them. If you've got lead, they have to have some place to dispose of that laundry that they wear at work all day. You have to provide medical surveillance to those employees. So typically it's done by means of a blood draw, just to make sure that we don't have excessive amounts or any lead, I should say, in the employees' blood systems. Provide training to those employees on the effects and the toxic effects of lead. Make sure we're posting signs within your facility, notifying the employees that there is lead in there, and then keeping records of all this information. All right, ergonomics. All right, I'm sure you all probably seen a picture like this before, right? I'm not really reinventing the wheel here. I'm not telling you anything new. The idea here really though is, we're always trying to maintain that sort of, I always want to stand up a little straighter and talk about ergonomics. You want to maintain that sort of neutral posture there, that is with your head, your back straight, shoulders back, your head up, and anytime you're sitting at your desk, there's a lot of compressive forces that you put on your back if you're sitting there all day long. You can do the calculations with it and just sitting there. Just sitting there, you're putting a lot of compressive forces on that lower back. So a good mitigation for that, try out a standing desk. I know those aren't always feasible. Nobody wants to stand all day either. So if you are sitting there at a desk, 8 hours a day, you should take, regular breaks just to get up, move around, walk around, kind of get the blood flowing again. But, really what we want to try and do is maintain sort of that neutral posture. It doesn't matter whether you're sitting at a desk or if you're working out on a shop floor, picking up and putting down heavy stuff all day. It's all about maintaining that sort of straight back neutral posture. All right, so this should work here. Let's see if we can play this. This is just a quick video here of. Please don't do that at work. Just illustrating a point here. That's right. I don't know what that motorcycle, I mean, motorcycle, a couple $100 at least, if it's empty. So, I mean, we can handle a lot. Yeah, that's kind of the point here. We can handle a lot of compressive forces. I mean, think of like an Olympic power lifter, they're lifting, 500-800 pounds up over top of their head. So we can handle a lot, but make sure that you got that good posture there before you try and do anything like that. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. All right, switching gears here again, we'll talk a little bit about young worker safety. I'll go and say there's nothing specific for, well, other than sort of the hours that they can work, and I'll show that here in a moment here. But if I go into a workplace, I'm treating everybody kind of equal, and that will include the young workers. But when you're talking about teenagers, they don't know anything, right? I mean, they have no experience, and so and the truth is that can be taken advantage of. They can be told to do some things that a more experienced worker probably would not want to do here. So, and there are real numbers to show that too. So there are about 17 million workers under the age of 25 across the US. So that's about almost 12% of the total workforce in the United States. In 1 year, there were 352 workers under the age of 25 that died from work-related injuries. 26 of those were minors, people under the age of 18. And we had one here in Kentucky, down in Western Kentucky. It's a pretty tragic story. I won't sadden anybody with it, but I mean, these things do happen. The incident rate for non-fatal injuries, so that is for teenagers ages 16 to 19, they were 149.8 per 10,000 full-time employees. So almost 150 injuries per 10,000 employees there. And then 20 to 24, almost 142 per 10,000 employees. So that adds up to a total here. So we've got a rate of work-related injuries treated in emergency departments for workers age 15 or 24 were 1.5 times greater than that for adults. So, there's real numbers there to show that, these kids, they don't know what they're doing. They are inexperienced, and they're going to do, kind of the things that they're told to do by an employer. And oftentimes that could be something that would be unsafe that, a more experienced worker would at least have the gumption to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put myself in harm's way. That's right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. They think they're invincible. That's right. They are invincible, right? They think they are. Some of the ways they get injured, though: unsafe equipment, inadequate safety training. I was thinking earlier today, I'm thinking some of the few jobs I had as a teenager, I don't recall ever getting any sort of safety training for any of the things I ever did. I know we did some unsafe things while I was at work. I know that I did. Not because my employer told me to, just because we were young and dumb. And we're like, oh, we can do this. Inadequate supervision. You don't want to hand a 17-year-old a circular saw and not watch how they're doing it, right? You want to make sure that you've properly instructed them and you're keeping an eye on them as an employer. They may do dangerous work that's illegal or inappropriate for someone under the age of 18. They may be under pressure to work faster, just general sort of stressful conditions. So workplace hazards associated with any specific jobs are another major cause of injury and illnesses. But, it doesn't matter if you're a teenager or not. We have to work to reduce or minimize those hazards and make sure that we're training all these employees how to work a job safely on the job. There are, child labor laws to protect youth. Mostly it's for preventing them from working long hours, and then also for exposure to any of the hazards working at a dangerous job. So this chart here, it kind of lays that out. So ages 14 to 15, they can work. They just cannot work before 7 a.m. And they cannot work after 7 p.m. during the school year. During the summer, that jumps up to 9 p.m. During school, the maximum hours they can work per day would be 3 hours on a school day, 8 hours on a non-school day, and for a total of just 18 hours per week. And then the maximum hours on school breaks, they can jump up to 40 hours per week. 16 to 17, either with or without parental permission. So if their parents can send a letter as stating that they can adhere to these lower standards here. But for 16 to 17-year-olds, they cannot work before 6 a.m. They cannot work after 10:30 p.m. preceding a non-school day, or 1 a.m. 11 p.m. with parental permission, and that jumps up to 1 a.m. If they don't have school the next day. Maximum hours during school, 6 hours on a school day, 6.5 hours on a school day if they have parental permission. Again, 8 hours for non-school days, and they can only work a maximum of 30 hours per week while they're in school. If they have that parental permission, can jump up to 40 hours there. And then outside of on school breaks, there's no restrictions for them. I'm not sure on the dates of those, but I think it's been around. No, yeah, no, I think it's been around for a while. I'm not sure what the actual dates for when they, yeah, no. And the OSHA Act, I won't read all this to you here, but the OSHA Act requires, and not, this is geared towards team workers, but the OSHA Act requires that we do provide a safe and work environment for your employees. And make sure you're providing with all the appropriate things that they would need. So personal protective equipment, make sure that they have their training, all those things that would provide those employees with a safe work environment. Okay, that's it for me. This is again my email. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I mean, that's really what we're here to do, is to answer your all's questions. And this is the sort of the general line to the Kentucky Education Labor Cabinet. So if you need to make an employee complaint, or if you have general questions, or if you want to request a survey or training, you can call this number right here. All right. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned your stop and top program. What are the top 3 leading industries for injury and illness in Kentucky?
Well, right now it would be the landscapers, and that's kind of where the focus has been for a little while. And roofers, and that's kind of part of our sort of local emphasis program here. Yep. Yes.
Hi, I just want. Just wanted to, the information about the child labor laws, is that on your website?
Yes, ma'am, that's part of the Code of Federal Regulations.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.